Because I thought it might be.
Right?
So I'm here to say your life.
There's a more like one, it's like lunch on the. It's got a little cookies. It's got a what? Fruit chocolate, and a cookie. And a key salad. It's not just too far, you know. I believe in those, but they have saved me on any.
Why are they?
Thanks, man.
Thank
you.
But
I'm over already, you know. If I eat wrong, it's. Well, man, I have like dessert.
I just had my second Starbucks today and the lady's like, weren't you caring about me? And I was like,
Let's figure here, double espresso over, chocolate milk and milk free.
Yeah.
On ice.
Okay.
That has really nice. That's what happens when your wife on the body shop. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that sounds great. Me and Mary.
Without actually being able to study the numbers.
Yeah, I got called. We said trusted on Saturday, we did on Sunday, finished up on Monday.
is that yours?
Oh, single.
Oh,
There's another one. I think it's back out, but.
oh, okay.
Is
it someone's house?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
My own. Well, yeah, my, so you're gonna like that, and my stuff,
Yeah,
young
yeah.
student, lots of 2 years back, and,
Oh, good for you
I
guys.
got it from that day, driving tomorrow.
I feel like I've been put in the corner.
You're on an
The
end.
naughty.
You're just in there. That's a corner.
Well.
That's it.
Here. Howdy. Good to see you. You too. Good looking at. Beautiful day out there. Yeah.
I have one left here
I went to.
in the stash.
Thank you.
Yep.
I went to when I went by it. I'm like, but then you beat me up there. I'm like, you're talking. I don't have mine. I'm like, it's up here. I didn't.
I don't think I do.
It's
They're fine right now. No, I have my computer. I think it's gonna be straightforward. I think we got all of the work done ahead of time. No, I don't need a lot of space, but they need me. I'm sorry. There's tends to be. No, the school board. Tonight, they're voting on the charter tonight. Well, what time are you leaving? Well, I'm virtually, their meeting is at the exact same time. Oh, it's 4:30 to 6 is the work session for the charter. So it's done, like it's all, like, I think they're just gonna go through it and just like fine tooth it, but we did all the things with the so everything is.
Oh, I thought we were conflicting at 6, so that.
No, well, then 6 o'clock is their vote.
Oh, okay.
But, yeah, so
We haven't phoned yourself yet.
tonight I'm gonna try.
Okay.
When I'm on the Google Meet and here, but hopefully, I mean, I think they're okay. But they're just like, you're the one that wrote the charter, can you be here? And I was like, no.
We told her to, I didn't before you see me.
How's no? How about
I'm
no?
like, no.
So hopefully. It's all good.
It's all good. Yeah, it's 5 years.
Very good.
It's going to be 5 years, yeah.
Well, give me 1 year for racing. I would hope so. I understand.
You know, honestly, I do not do another 10-year again. 10 was too hard because so many statutes had changed since the last one. It actually really complicated, like, all of like federal standards for education, state standards, like how financial pass throughs. Five is great. The airport. Yeah.
So I was like, I don't want to. No, we've been working on that.
Yeah.
Access wall.
Yeah.
And now knows, so we finished the access wall upstairs. And it's pretty, it looks great. And now is already demoed the tile, all the tile sheds. So that's the next one.
Having to talk.
Put stacks down.
And they're.
It'll look nice.
So, I
So
mean.
she's in.
it's-
So you didn't do
She's in project.
10 years, really.
And then when I get home, no, I'm in project. So you can use them as long
Both
as.
sides. Everyone's like, well, where is, what about this document? So we're like, I don't have that, and then just was like, and then we were like, there was stuff there, it was just for each of them. It was a lot of time.
You think of your, you're focused on, you've been in business. It's hard to get.
Yeah, yeah.
Takes a while.
Exactly.
It makes sense.
No, so I think 5 is good, and 5, they actually. Water rates, even though we need it on testing and stuff. We have the highest test
In
scores
Dallas.
currently in this one.
Okay.
Oh, good, that's a tough.
Heat is great. So I think that they're gonna be on
8 minutes later.
ratifying
Take
it.
care of
tonight.
Thanks.
You bet, but
Okay,
John will be here in a minute, he's like right around the corner.
okay, then we'll just go ahead and.
Around the corner too. You always parked out here.
Everybody, because it's.
Yeah.
been-
It's pretty crowded. Oh, that was.
Yeah.
Okay, that's how.
Yeah, when it's later, I park out front, but it's supposed to be bus.
You can go.
Bus.
well, hopefully, I'm trying to be proactive, but I think that
But you can shut the door when you need to. Right, you got it.
hopefully,
All the stuff. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
it says on the agenda, I'm on Georgetown Community School Charter, they just even said that. So
So it should be a slam dunk.
it should be, but they're pushing it to get it, it's like, it has to be the CDE by the 15th, because it expires in 30.
Yeah.
So they got to the why.
So somebody's got to make the stamps tomorrow.
Well, and then Georgetown has to vote on it before, like, they said it's a CDE, but we'll vote on it, like, it's a 2-second. Yeah, it's done. So that was one of the most challenging things I've ever experienced, was dealing with that charter. It was great, and I'm proud of what I learned and happy with what I learned, but like, never, it's a lot, I'll never do that.
So. That is awesome. That's gonna be awesome. Yeah.
Which one's in Colorado Springs?
District 11.
Oh, okay.
And that's around on the west side and, you know, honestly. It could be. To the.
And there's not.
School district, then with not very open. No, it's like, but it's we take kids away from them.
Everybody wins,
Yeah.
it's school choices, like, but doing it in a good way.
Oh, I'm good, but I had to learn so much. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we're all here. All right, it is 4:39 PM. Let's go ahead and start our work session. It is Tuesday, June 11th, 2024. And just as a reminder, the purpose of our work session is to discuss ordinance number 7, series 2024, and police policies and steps for direction to hire the town marshal and police officer. So let's go ahead and start with ordinance number 7, which is also in our packet. It's agenda item number 2. So it should be fairly easy to get to. There it is. Okay. So, it seemed pretty straightforward, but Jerry, did you have anything to
Yeah, I should make a couple
share with
of
us?
points.
Mhm.
As as the board knows, there's a desire to retitle this position as police chief for lots of good reasons, perfectly fine, the board has authority to do that. The charter says that the board shall appoint a number of officers, not, including not limited to a county marshal, which gives us the room to say, that's fine. We can also appoint a police chief, and that honors the charter and still allows you to accomplish that naming goal that I know is important. But when you're doing that, you see that the present code section that refers to the marshal now in front of you with with the edits that merely make the name change. But having said that, I intentionally highlighted two sections within that same code section, because to begin with, they're a little bit internally inconsistent. And it really is, I think, the time to decide what authority the marshal has around hiring and firing employees. And you'll notice right now, to be blunt, the first paragraph is kind of a compromise. A decade ago, I recall something like that, maybe less than a decade, having the now police chief report to the administrator with respect to administrative financial operations, but is responsible for the professional supervision management of police officers. That's fine. Obviously, you want the marshal to supervise officers because it's a professional supervising other professionals within that field. But then you go down to the second paragraph that's highlighted about hire, retain, and terminate. Typically, the manager of the community does the hiring and firing of all of the employees. And the line that was sort of drawn years ago, and it's up to you to either keep it this way or change it, was that okay, administrative financial operations, you report to the administrator. I'm not sure what that means, really. But in terms of all personnel, you get to hire and fire your people as the marshal or as the police chief. And that really limits the administrator's ability to control the employees in the town. I get it that in some jurisdictions, the police chief does the hiring, but in most cases, it's the management that hires. There's a disciplinary process, once you're hired, but that's the policy question for you. The name change, easy. But the policy question is, right now, this line that's drawn, I don't think it's drawn really clearly, to be honest, and you're the ones that draw the line, and you've got to be happy with it. It's not me. But I observed, especially the hire, retain, and terminate police officers. If there's an officer that the administrator believes should be terminated, and the police chief believes should not, that officer stays. That's just how this is now. And the administrator's authority is administrative and financial. So I guess budget a little bit, but not a lot of influence as far as that comes out. So you're the ones who design really the relationship between your administrator and the rest of the town employees. I'm sorry, go ahead. No, this is an exception to the rule for all of the employees, where the administrator reviews them, hires, approves hiring, firing, discipline. So it's an exception to that.
I disagree. I think that the administrator, should have the power to hire and fire. Because isn't this exactly the situation we were in? I mean, Randy hired Tim Collins.
Yeah.
If any of you ever got the record of Tim Collins, would you have hired him? No, probably not. So I just saying, why are you all looking at me?
Because we're involved.
Serious and paying attention.
But I'm just wondering, if
You're okay.
you're giving me that, what the hell?
No, you're on the right track.
Good.
It's 4:45. We're probably gonna be here till now.
Okay, and just so that the recording is nice and clear, let's try not to all talk at once.
Sorry.
Jen called me with a question because she was trying to work on minutes. And there were a couple of points where there were too many side conversations going on and you really couldn't tell what was being said. So try not to.
So years back, John and Lynette, you could probably address this the best, and Gary, you were involved too. Just as I came on this board, we had a personnel and police committee that a board member was assigned to. And then it just kind of withered away and hadn't been called upon for years, since, you know, 6-7 years. Is that something we should be looking to reinstate to help us in this?
Well, there's issues with personnel that the board doesn't want to be involved with, right, Jerry?
Sure, you know, for all other employees besides the police, the, you know, the uniform rule out there is the manager controls, manager administrator, you know, runs that show, sometimes will delegate, but, you know, works through department heads and hires and fires employees and disciplines them, and that's enough. In the police realm, you do see citizen commissions to kind of assist in making disciplinary recommendations to, around the officers, maybe recommendations to the manager in that jurisdiction or the police chief, if that's who's got the power that presently the chief has here on hire, fire, terminate. So I think, to Mary's point, I think a commission on police matters exclusively would be a good thing. I think it's a small enough jurisdiction here that to have one help there, sort of working with the manager on other employees with no pejorative intent, just not, I think that's more layering than you need. We need a new snowplow driver, you need a committee to sort of help them, and I can figure that out. The police is a little different in terms of their policies and how they should be managed and supervised and disciplined. So I think the manager or the chief, whoever you end up with being in charge of hiring, fire, and discipline officers could use that help. But that I view as kind of parallel to the question of, all right, well, who's gonna hire and fire and who's gonna get help by such a committee? So neither question decides the other. You know, do you need a commission? Maybe so. Who should be hiring, fire, and supervising? Is it the chief or is it the administrator?
Or the commission.
Those are the commission. Conceivable, I wouldn't have a commission. I'd have a commission make a recommendation.
Okay.
But ultimately, it's gotta be an actual paid town officer who's hiring and firing other employees.
But we want the town administrator involved, that's, to your point, and that's what we had discussed in the past. We don't want it just at, or a joint decision, and then if maybe there is a disagreement, then it comes to a higher level.
Well, come to us or something
Right.
like that, but I'm sure that a lot of those things can be worked out between the administrator and the chief.
Yeah, I mean, I think only if it falls, I think the only way you want to go to, so I like my ideas with this, please, you know, I like the idea of the police chief hiring with the approval of the administrator for hiring, but then having the administrator whose issues kind of assess, so we're not in the same situation we just ran. You know, as a chief, you should get to kind of choose your staff as no different than a city administrator. But when it comes to firing, you know, if you have issues, it should go to the administrators, how I kind of see it. That way we don't get stuck in a situation that there's have a backup plan if there's an issue where who knows for what reason, but if there's a conflict with the city administrator, you still have a backup plan so we don't get stuck in this again. Or we're not sure what's going on. Does that make sense?
I would also hope that in a situation where if the police chief was like, well, I don't want to hire this person, and the town administrator was like, well, we're hiring him, that would be taken into consideration in a recommendation of some sort, that if there was a good reason to I mean, I think that the police chief should have the right to supervise their staff, just like I would expect the road and bridge guys to be able to pick.
But that's exactly what happened in this last situation.
That is, okay.
So
But you
I'll say, me and our attorney did not recommend hire, and the police chief hired anyways.
got
But
it.
it has,
And there's no accountability for us And that's why this came to that situation, because it's like, I can understand the police chief. Well, let me back up for a second. The way things have been for a while is the police chief would hire somebody without interviews or anything. We changed that, so every time we hire somebody now, on whatever position, they're interviewed by a panel. And so there's a board already of accountability to kind of show to vet that.
Who's serving on that board? Like,
It's selected
oh,
as needed, so we have a couple members here, it depends what the position is.
Okay.
So if it's.
so it's not like an established board, it's
No.
like a board that you're like,
Yeah.
I have to do this, okay.
Correct, yeah, it's handpicked according to whether the specific need is.
Okay.
So if it's planning commission, we may have a planning commissioner on there, and then some of you may be on that, but it's high level. But in this situation, I think that this is what we're trying to stop from, like, the administrator, just to give a recommendation is not good enough.
That makes sense, so then I feel that we should have the town administrator hire.
Well, I like the chief hiring, but it has to be approved by the town administrator.
Cause I
But
mean,
if that,
So the town administrator, so if the chief says, yeah, I like this guy, then it still goes through our administrator. Does that make sense?
well, think about it in the last instance, if Rick was able to be involved.
Right,
Randy would have come to with Tim Collins's resume and said, I'm interested in this officer. Rick would have said, wait a minute, isn't this the guy that was standing on the hood of that car with his gun pointed towards the driver? No.
and then it's done, he moves on to the next person he
Yeah.
wants to hire.
Yeah.
It's the right process, but I mean, tell me why that wouldn't work, I'm sure we have ideas.
It would, you have, there's probably, 3 ways to look at it, it might be 4, but there's one on either bookend. Police chief hires, fires, terminates, disciplines employees. That's what said, that's really the rule now.
Right.
The chief maybe in the past has asked the administrative opinions, but that's not in the rule. Thank you very much, doesn't really change that. Or you can flip it to the other bookend, which is administrator hires, fires, disciplines, period. That's a door. Or you can do one of the versions in between, which is, could be administrator hires, fires, disciplines with the consent of, or the other way around, chief hires, fires, disciplines with the consent of. And it's like the US Senate saying they'll say yes or no to a Supreme Court nominee, the president makes a nomination and the Senate says yes or no, and the Senate can say no. And if the Senate says no, then effectively it doesn't happen. So I suspect you want to work in the middle here. And the 2 doors in the middle are obvious, someone has the right to do it with the approval of someone else. And so I don't have a strong feeling as between those 2. You probably do and should talk about it.
The town administrator oversees the police chief, just as we do, okay? So why are we not holding our police chief and our town administrator responsible for hiring those people? The police chief in the interview process is bringing his experience, his or her experience with, to that interview and looking at the experience. The town administrator and anyone else on that panel is looking at it through the town's lenses. Lenses are plural or lensi? So, we want it with approval because we don't want that wild card again, because that's exactly what happened.
It wasn't
The two of them
enough.
discussed it, and it didn't go the way he felt it should have now. So,
Is the safest bet for the town administrator to hold that card hiring and firing? Is that the safest option?
Well, ultimately, he has to sign off on it,
Yeah.
or he doesn't,
Right.
where he can't, it's not part of it, ultimately, that's what should happen.
I guess in my view, the police chief or marshal, whatever we title them, has the expertise to sift through the resumes and do the interviews, conduct them, and then make a recommendation to the administrator for approval. I think that in my view, that's the way it ought to go. That the police chief should feel like they have a very strong say in who gets hired,
Of course,
but then it's, the administrator has a veto power if there is something that just doesn't fit.
But we're also looking at some kind of an interview process here too for that. For the additional officers, where we're not just talking one-on-one. Hey buddy, come on, I'll get you a job. Rick, sign off on this guy, he's a good guy. It's real, people, we know this.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so if we have outside of the police department, if we have this standing procedure that all of our departments, and no one is different at that level of hiring than any other, you know?
We do that across the board. That's the way we
So-
hire everyone.
So if that's established now and all, you know. Someone internally can be making the outreach and say, hey, we got a job opening here, are you interested? But there's still a formality of it.
I would agree with that, because in the way that we do things now, there may be a department head that says, hey, I've got this guy that I really want to interview, so it's kind of making an internal recommendation. However, once it goes through the vetting process, he may not be the one. And it becomes very clear through the interviews who we hire. And then ultimately it's my decision. However, I'm not gonna hire somebody that's not with that board. When we all, I mean, some of you guys have been in the interview process, and it's usually we don't stop until we're kind of united on somebody. Now, I know, granted, not everyone does that, but that's the way that I've always done the interview hiring process, and it's worked very well. Now, I mean, it just seems weird if you would do something different in the police department when it's not the same across the board with everything else.
well, and I think that it's also really important to note that this is a policy that will exist in perpetuity. Like it's not, this isn't this immediate thing, this needs to live forever. No matter what's going on to protect.
Think too how many towns have had to scramble and put together a police oversight board when issues have come up.
Just having those guys with the training.
So we're trying to circumvent that by having more than one person involved in that process. Not even just town staff, but you know, however we bring that together so that the selection process is the best we can do. With his approval.
So how do we write that to make it clear?
Jared makes that magical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we lawyer that?
He's right.
I'm working on it. Right now, the problem for us in the past has always been that second highlighted provision, even though it says subject to budgetary appropriation and review approval of the town minister, that's viewed as budgetary approval. Do we have the money for the new officer, not? Am I saying yes or no to your recommendation sheet to hire that officer? So I think.
Can I bring up a couple other questions I have on this too, before you?
Sure, yeah, I'll keep making notes and when you're.
They're minor, but I think
Sure,
they're
yeah.
gonna come up.
Yep,
So we're dealing with the, you know, police department, sworn staff, and we now have civilian staff on our police department, and this does not include that, and I think it should,
Definitely should.
because it, right now, yeah. So
That was mentioned in there.
in both of your highlighted paragraphs,
okay,
and then just one other little addition
okay,
under parentheses 4, parenthetical number 4,
praying for you.
the maintain and make available for inspection.
Uh-huh.
Are we kind of there too? The
Yeah.
second line,
Uh-huh.
so it reads that maintain and make available for inspection such books, accounts,
Yeah,
receipts and records of the police department as may be required by law to the board of selectmen and the town administrator. So there's still
yeah,
the
Got it.
oversight of both.
got it, that's easy, yeah.
Right.
what we might think about, and those are easy to make. Number 4, number 5, problem with number 5 and and the lead in kind of both address the same thing to some extent, the professional supervision and management of police officers and reserve members. You would probably, everywhere we talk about police officers, and reserve members, we probably want to say, just professional supervision management of all sworn and unsworn, right? Is that,
Non-sworn,
sure, not
they're not on.
sworn and non-sworn?
Sworn at.
Aren't they? I mean, isn't Kim, is she sworn?
No, she's not.
Oh, okay.
Or you could say civilian.
Civilian, maybe that's.
As sworn civilian personnel.
Yeah, I like
Oh, I
non-sworn
understand.
honestly, because civilian means that the police are military, and I
So
Okay.
sworn and
I
non-sworn.
think that doesn't apply to all
No, I
of
get it.
Okay.
them. What we might consider is,
Or support staff, you could say support staff,
sure,
I mean, if you want, because, could be,
what we might consider sort of telescoping that all under this first highlighted. Because the first highlighted is kind of the compromise, right? The chief reports to the administrator with respect to administrative financial operations. And then has got his own show for professional supervision. That was the compromise that got it written. And it conflicts in some ways with the last one, it's just a mess. I'm thinking that maybe you eliminate number 5 and you do all the work up there at the top. Right? So you'd say something like the police chief, or maybe you leave it at 5 and then just take out all the stuff at the top. That might be easier. Right? So you're definitely, in fact, I would do that. And then all the action can be number 5. And it can be higher, I'd say discipline, retain is not helpful. But higher discipline and terminate police officers and reserve members, sworn and not sworn. Subject to the approval of the town administrator, period. Taking out all the budget, the budget language is just not helpful at all. We know that that's true. But that would mean that the hiring and discipline and termination would be what amounts to a recommendation from the police chief to the administrator, who would then say yes or no.
so it would read hire, retain, and hire, discipline and terminate such police officers, reserve members, and non-sworn or support personnel as being necessary for the proper operation of the police department with the approval from the administrator.
With the approval.
So we're striking the subject to budgetary appropriation.
Yeah.
And the review, or the review and approval,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. And maybe to make it crystal clear for a year from now, 2 years from now, 20 years from now, there will be definitely a new administrator, police chief, and town attorney. Because 20 years from now, I'm not. So maybe I say with the final approval of the town administrator, then there's no, gee, I just needed a recommendation, And if you're gonna do that, I'd make it crystal clear.
Oh, yeah.
And then they will, all the police chief and all the personnel will be subject to the same annual review process that the rest of the town staff are. Because it seemed to me that was a lacking piece of the last couple of years.
Yeah, I agree, and I would support that, is that even reviews would all be the same for them too.
And so maybe that should be thrown in here, so that it's. As
Uh,
clear as it gets.
Yeah, remembering that this section is about the police chief,
Yes,
so it's, How's the police chief hired and what are his or her authorities? Elsewhere in
And
the
Rick can
code,
just make that call, right?
yeah, I think our
It doesn't have to be in the.
all the employees of the town, I mean, the personnel policies will say. All the employees are subject to these personnel policies.
How is it hurting us by adding a review, maybe not even saying annual, but a review in this, what's in number 5? So that, again, it reinforces, or why, how would it hurt us if we didn't?
Subject to the town policy.
It wouldn't. It wouldn't.
Because that, again, was an issue that we had. So we're making it crystal clear what the expectation is.
And it's consistent across the board.
Right.
Right.
Ordinance.
And this might be just the first step. I would like to think that the other town policies, personnel policies are being revamped, that, so that there's the written consistency in those too.
Yeah.
So they're all
All consistent.
consistent.
Almost.
So that would bring us to what, door number 3 then, administrator hires with approval of the police chief, or?
Well, I think it's 1 and 2. But you want the police chief to have, to do the initial work. It takes Rick to work, but it's still gonna go through the process. But then you leave it up.
But
to
if Rick
the-
says no, it doesn't happen.
Exactly.
And if Rick
exactly.
says we have to let that person go, it happens.
Yeah, so you're giving the police chief the opportunity to find who he thinks he wants, but it still has to be approved through Rick.
And do you
And
still
our,
have to,
like we've done before. So it still goes through the process. But then instead of having Rick do it in hopes that, you know, it works out, you give that little bit of freedom, but it's still. I mean, does that seem?
I just want to make sure the process is honored, because otherwise
Yeah.
it looks like the good old boy network, and that's.
Well, it sounds that problem, but you don't want to take away that if, you know, if somebody's gonna work under you, you want to be comfortable with that person. But then you shouldn't have all the freedom to just pick and choose who you want. It still goes through the process. It's the same thing we just did, correct, with the city administrative assistant, with our police and such, right? It'd be the same exact process. So it goes through the process.
You know, like our CEO doesn't sit in on the interviews, but for a higher level position, she will meet with them, do her own interview, and have the final approval.
How about just put in following the town process? Yeah, simple.
Do we have the town process written down in black and white? Because if we don't, then we're back into this loosey-goosey position and
Everybody's 5 out of 5.
subject to interpretation.
Well, and I like what Rick has done, but like we said, Rick, not everybody does that, so we should make that part of the process. Put it in writing that this is just what we do for those positions down the road.
Well, and this position in particular, let's
Oh,
focus on
100%.
just this,
Yeah,
yeah,
but it's following in line with what's been done in other areas, but of course, yeah, just for this.
yeah.
Well, we might, didn't make the notes, and what we might do for the first paragraph that's been highlighted is changes the first sentence stays the same, although I want to refer back to the sheriff business. But then take out all the highlighted. And replace it with police chief shall be annually reviewed by the town administrator, subject to town personnel policies, because you wanted a review.
Well, but when we were discussing our former chief black marshal, that review would have come to us because we had the oversight over him in that respect also.
Well, you have to decide if you want, if it's true, the marshal or the chief is appointed and holds office at your pleasure. So that is a position that Rick doesn't hire you. And I'm happy to put in the annual review by the board of selectmen. I heard that you wanted annual review, but
Yeah.
that's truly.
Yes,
Yes. Okay. So,
So I guess I'm just questioning, I mean, in the past, and maybe we want to prevent things going down that same road. The board didn't have that kind of involvement with the police chief marshal. The administrator has much more frequent contact. And I know what a struggle it has been to just do the administrator's reviews. Are we prepared to jump on board and say the board of selectmen? I mean, Jerry's had to call people individually and pry the review comments out of them. I don't want to go be in that same boat.
So how can we have their evaluation reviewed by us before you sign off on it?
I could do it first.
So if he evaluates, reviews it with us, so that we're on the same page, knowledgeable, realize what's going on this past year, you know, whatever. And then give him the nod to,
Well, what I like,
to discuss goals, because again, we form those policies of how we want this town to be. He needs to execute, or the police department, the police chief needs to execute. If we're hiring them still, we should still be involved in that process. Oh, and here are your goals for next year. Right.
Would that go into this policy though, or would that go into like a separate personnel policy? Because I'm assuming a personnel policy that's probably lengthy and extensive for all the departments. And so, I mean, I'm not trying to muddy the waters, but would we do the same thing for road and bridge? Would we do the same thing for water? Like, is it this specific department, like where I don't disagree that we shouldn't be involved in the process, but I do worry about us getting into the weeds a little bit.
Does the code have to dictate that we do that? Or can the code just say and is subject to an annual
Will be subject to an annual.
performance review?
here's what I like, and this where I know that like we're focused on this, but why can't we kind of do a better one and done that kind of covers it? What Rick has utilized in the past was based off of him. And that could change if down the road we get a different city administrator and how he wants to do stuff. If we make this code and it covers at the very least, you know. And maybe it does include most of the staff. It was pretty easy for Rick to reach out and say, yeah, I need a board to help hire with these situations. Because if we put that in place, what I worry about is, and it's like what Mary's saying, if it gets lost that we put it on the city administrator, well, if we get a new city administrator, does it not become, well, the chief likes this and then it's so cool without it being put in a place or they want to change it. So, but I don't know how deep we go into that.
So this code section though is
Yeah.
just for the police chief, trying to do a one and done beyond.
Right, because it's getting tough. If we do it here, we still need to do it in the other areas.
Maybe,
But if you do,
it may
well,
already be done.
is it Rick? I mean, you know better. I mean, did you choose to pick out like a kind of a hiring crew to vet that? Or was that something that you chose to do?
That's what I chose to do.
Right.
But we've always interviewed in departments. So in road and bridge, water, we've always done interviews in there. But for this situation, I made it apply. So it was across the board.
Perfect.
And I'll also, just one other note too, is I went back and looked at evaluations when I've done evaluations. And in fact, I'm getting ready to do one right now. It's a merit one, because we put it in the budget to do a merit increase. So I'm getting ready to do a merit review. And there's plenty of reviews from previous administrators on our marshal. So, I mean, he's been reviewed consistently. He just hasn't reviewed his staff. That's the breakdown.
Gotcha.
That's where it was supposed to happen across the board and it wasn't. But, that's why we're gonna change that stuff right now. But whether you want me to continue to review the marshal chief, police chief, and then bring it to you for your comments and then assessments of goals, because he does. I mean, he is hired from this board just like I am. But I'm just saying, as far as this policy goes, the administrator has done that consistently from previous administrators too, and I have done it too, when I've reviewed the market.
Well, last thing, I'll say, and I'll be kind of done, and I get where Mary's going with this, if we want to protect it, then. And I get what I'm not saying, because it's hard enough to get us together for doing the city administrator. But why can we just do that once a year and do both at the same time? Does that make sense? You know, if you really want to be that involved, or if you want to just leave on the city administrator for that.
If I, as a board of selectmen, am responsible for hiring XYZ person, I want to have some input into the evaluation. I'm all for no one calling me and having me fill out this stuff, because I'm not dealing with them on a day-to-day basis, and I'm comfortable, extremely comfortable relying on our town administrator for that. But I think then in the evaluation process for some of those key titles, those key positions, and let's just start with the police chief, okay? Let's worry about everybody else some other days, some other time. But right here, right now, let's have that evaluation before it's completed, come before us. We have the opportunity in an exec session to discuss that, put together, just as we do with Rick. You know, and give those goals and, you know.
How about this? Sorry. Not to, people, here's what I'm kind of hearing. If you're looking at this first paragraph, it says and I'll just start using police chief consistently, and that way we can stop.
Yes.
Wrapping ourselves around the axle. The town police chief shall be appointed by and hold office at the pleasure of the board of selectmen. Shall have and exercise such authority powers within the town similar to the sheriff and the state law, period. The town administrator shall prepare an annual review of the police chief for the use of the board of selectmen. Remembering that he holds office at your pleasure. The town administrator provides an annual review and says, here it is, board of selectmen. You can choose what to do with that. Today, tomorrow, 10 years from now, the board of selectmen might want to use it, as a part of a formal review. 20 years from now, they might say, thank you very much, we're moving on, because we like our chief, we don't have any issues. We'll put that in the file, but it leaves a fair amount of flexibility with, you still get an annual review, and you can intensify that, and based upon your receipt of that review from the administrator, you could set, some kind of executive session meeting with the chief and really drill into him or her. Does that work? Does that encompass enough that?
Sure.
Okay, now, while we're on that same subject, and then we'll go to the last paragraph. I know that one of the reasons we're changing from chief to marshal is
Marshal
because.
chief.
Yeah, why am I not on the rule?
What your thought?
We need to get this ordinance adopted. One of the reasons we're doing that is how that is messaged out into the world. And I see that the authority of the now police chief is quote similar to that of sheriff under state law. That might also rub people the wrong way. I pulled up the job description for the police chief in the city of Wheat Ridge, which I'm the city attorney for, on that one, while I was on the internet here. And it just, it's got various duties, but it doesn't say, here's an analogy for your power. I think you ought to put a period after board of selectmen. Police chiefs appointed by and holds pleasure of the board of selectmen. Applicants for this job will be fine with that. They don't need to be told. And we're telling you, I think, the wrong thing by saying you're a sheriff. Right? I mean, that's kind of the insane league as marshal. Okay with you? All right, fine. Takes care of that, bringing us to the paragraph 5.
Does it not though have to say that they'll have
No, I think you
shall have and exercise such authority and powers within the town under state law? I think we're just striking out the similar to that.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, that's
We
fine.
still have to give them the authority and power, the authority and police
Yeah.
powers
Yep.
under state law.
Yeah,
I like that.
I think it's assumed, but I'm fine.
Okay.
Gotcha. All right, fine, I'll do that. Bring us to paragraph 5. And what I now have for this is, it would read hire, discipline, and terminate. This is a power of the chief. Hire, discipline, terminate such police officers, common reserve members, and non-sworn employees as deemed necessary for the proper operation of the police department. subject to the final approval of the town administrator. Does that work?
Did you want to put in a review,
Yeah.
Fine.
higher discipline review and terminate?
Well, I've got discipline, in my opinion, includes review, but I'm fine to add
Say review.
hire, review, discipline, and terminate.
No, towards the end, subject
Oh.
to budgetary appropriation and the review.
Probably didn't like
With the
budgetary.
review.
I took out budgetary appropriation and the review end, but you'd like to keep the review and final approval.
Yeah,
Well, so since I'm off the cross the board staff with that.
Got it.
Do we want it so that, because obviously with you, Rick, you know, you would, when it comes to just the chiefs. Since we're leaving that, right, we're going kind of with your hands. Do we want to add that for down the road, it's 10 years down the road, that it's also, you know, members that city administrator, I don't know how you write it out. But so that, just like we've done in the past, I mean, to me, it was awesome being a part of, hiring a police administrator. You know, and then it seemed like it was more a part of this board, so that city administrator picks people to help vet for that chief down the road, or.
I get where you're going, but I'm not sure the code needs to define that. I think the board can direct the administrator,
So down the road.
whoever that is at the time.
Okay, perfect.
To form a committee.
Yes.
Exactly.
Form a committee.
I agree with that.
Okay, gotcha. Cool.
It doesn't have to state it. We have our policies. We have lots of policies that we state in code,
Okay.
and the policies can change.
I love that process, and it's like, it's awesome.
I think I have sufficient notes that when you get to this on first readings,
Uh-huh,
we can get it adopted on first reading.
okay. Okay. Or, I do.
Okay.
I haven't forgotten, have not forgotten. Okay. Okay,
Before we get to. So,
yes. So before we dive into police policies, Jerry's got a little bit of, sort of line drawing for us for tonight.
I wanted to, kind of reflect on what you can do and not do an executive session around the police department. Understandably, you know, the board would like, to, I think, probably hear from their consultant, in executive session, and, talk about the process for replacing for filling this position in executive session. And I've done the work of bringing the statute with me, because remember, executive sessions, you know, the rule is your meetings are open except for, it's Swiss cheese. The cheese is it's my analogy, no one ever laughs anymore. I'm trying so hard. The rule was the cheese.
us to be serious.
Yeah, we were just hanging on every word, and we thought you were going, you're right. I apologize. The rule was to give the exceptions of the holes, and so the rule was your meetings are open. But there are exceptions for executive sessions, but there's a list, and those, you know, those holes are limited. And the one for personnel is this. Personnel, you can go to executive session for personnel matters, except if the employee who's the subject of the session has requested an open meeting, or if personnel matter involves more than one employee, all of them have requested an open meeting. So the personnel section is really, as written, focused on people, individual employees that you have. I'll tell you a couple things. First, it's generally interpreted, and I'm comfortable interpreting it to include employees you don't have yet. Right, when you're about to hire and you've got someone that isn't yet an employee, they don't get to consent, you know, to whether or not you talk about an executive session after they're not an employee yet. And but on the strict words of the statute, you think maybe not, you know, it's pretty narrow. In addition, though, happily, there's a decision out of the Court of Appeals in 2015 that has some, what they call dictating, in that they were deciding the case on this one issue. And it's sort of a by the way that sometimes courts do, you know. And so the by the way, and I don't often read court cases here, but because it's pertinent what we're trying, the line we're trying to draw, The by the way that the court said was, this personnel matters may include a wide ranging list of topics, including setting rates of compensation or the amount of leave employees may earn. Not just the day-to-day supervision by county commissioners. The case was all about, there's actually a provision in statute that lets boards of county commissioners convene 2 commissioners and actually supervise department heads and have meetings with them, and those aren't open meetings. And normally it would be, you get a quorum and you're into an open meeting. And the legislature at the behest of the Colorado County, they carved that exception out. I was thinking of the municipal event. So that was what the lawsuit was mostly about, which isn't our issue, but kind of as the by the way, they said, personal matters covers a wide range of things. So I'm taking as much comfort in clinging to that language as I can, despite the fact that it is a little broader than the hole in the cheese statute says. So with that in mind, I wanted to tell you, I've given a lot of thought and work on this. I think the line I would draw, and looking at the things that you've got here for tonight, this is about the steps of direction to hire town marshal and police officer. That's personnel. And I'm fine with that up to the point where you've got an existing employee that says, no, I don't want myself discussed in the executive session. Statute's really clear, they get the right to either be in that session or they have me do it in public. There's not a door number 3 where you get to talk about them over their objection in executive session. So with that one line drawn, the other things you want to talk about, including hearing from your consultants, are fine. I'll need to be careful when we're in exec session to say, now we're migrating to talking about an employee who's either not here or has not, given authority for us to talk about him or her in executive session. Sorry for that long lecture, but I realize that broadens the rule a little bit. It allows you to do an executive session, what you were doing in open session last time, most of it anyhow. And that's fine with me, but I'll need to kind of ride herd on it in the session, if you don't mind, to guide you away from the wrong thing, yeah.
And I just want to make a point of just clarity. Last meeting, it was requested to be any discussion related to the current marshal to be in public. This one, he has given consent to be in executive.
Okay, so right,
Just to make sure we were aware of that.
that checks that box as well.
Yeah.
Were there questions about that? I normally hew to a fairly, conservative, straightforward reading of the statute. But I went to the resources to see if we had any flexibility, and I found this case and it hasn't been overturned. Makes me a little nervous because it really wasn't what that case is about. But we've got a court of appeal, hasn't been overturned. I'm gonna use that up to the point where you're really getting more mileage than you should. But I think that allows you to do a little more exec session if you want to, and I can support that. Any questions or concerns about that?
Since we know we have this consent too, I think we can just consolidate
Even
all
better.
of that to
Yep.
the exec session.
I agree.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
Thanks, folks.
All right. Okay, so, next we have the policies, so internal affairs section,
Did we get any copy of that?
No, I don't think, I was just gonna ask that.
I didn't get a copy. of that.
no. So I guess what we discussed, we talked about the edits that Jerry did. Didn't get any feedback yet from John Gaskins. However, my personal feeling is that forming that police oversight committee would take care of the policy revisions as well. And I think it's a good idea to just sort of, maybe, yes, you pull out a section that's become highly relevant. But for the most part, you kind of go from the beginning and edit. I mean, to me, that makes the most sense rather than, lots of jumping around. Because you might miss something if you start really leapfrogging.
Well, and
at random.
that's why a few meetings ago, I asked him if nothing else, let's have a table of contents. There may be some policies that we don't have to look at, but we should be looking at what our, you know, what our topics are that our policy covers. And, you know, when they were implemented, when they were updated, because some of them may be a little out of date. You know, again, the bigger organizations, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, Colorado, I'm sure they do the same thing. They kind of have a policy guideline too, and I realize every department takes those policies and massages it so that it fits those departments. I'd rather see that generalized one that comes from, you know, the highest authority in Colorado or the highest authority international wise, you know, United States wise, obviously. But, and massage it rather than taking, Colorado Springs, because they may have already ruled out some of the things that we feel, you know, and then that policy can be reviewed at this level, maybe to, just so that we're aware of it, and then we kick it to Jerry, so we're not inundating our lawyer with going through it when we're all, you know, that way we can put all the questions kind of out too, and it can be more consolidated, but right now, to me, this seems so random. Why are we looking at the internal affairs one? Why are we looking, you know, it's like, you know.
I agree with
So
that,
we
rule
need
out.
we need
And
a
it's not a
better process, and we want to help, truly, we want to help, you know, so,
I mean, we started talking about that whole, issue and wanting to be involved in that process back in November.
yeah.
So I think, and, you know, so is it time to form that committee?
I'm fine with that.
Definitely. I think definitely.
So, okay, we will need to put that in an action item, which, is there any problem with just amending our regular agenda? Okay,
I've seen Mark Collins.
yep, he's been there for a while.
Oh, okay.
So I was just trying to consolidate all of these policy things into, let's form a working committee to review. Because I think that takes it out of regular meeting. I mean, it allows people to really dive in, do the research, discuss, and then bring a nice finished draft to the full board.
Can I clarify one thing?
Mhm.
Do we intend to include the LPR policy into that committee, or could we get that through too?
We should be putting it into the committee. We've got to follow what we're saying we feel that we need to do. And there are going to be some changes to that. Because again, if you look at that LPR policy now, as Jerry had brought up with the internal investigations one, there's verbiage in there that does not apply to Georgetown Police
I
Department.
noticed that
And
too.
we need to clean that up, you know, and there's, so that.
So do we still feel good about trying to get the license plate readers moving tonight?
I think that's, that's a totally different topic.
Yeah, because that's gonna take several months, by the way.
Oh, is
Exactly.
it? I thought those were like
Like off the shelf.
No,
plug and play.
no, because we still have to get, CDOT right of way approvals, because that's around the roundabout, so it's a process as well.
So we can still do the license plate readers tonight without having.
We can still take action on that, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yes.
move forward, but, and then again, that gives us time to, you know.
I felt like,
Sorry,
look at the
Sarah.
policy, I know that came up last week and when we brought up, there wasn't even an existing policy for that.
But that was more to put the thought in
Yeah.
mind, let's, as we bring in some of this equipment that, you know, is new and cool, there has to be some parameters to it. So that anyone can ask, well, how, you know, it's like rocket cleaners, so.
Precisely. Okay,
Thank you for clarifying it. for me.
So we're not gonna be here eternally, you know.
Correct.
I have a sleeping pack in the car.
So I
I canceled my Wednesday plans.
I said, I did ask Mark to come and share.
Yes.
During this time, just an update so that, you know, he can be here and you guys can ask questions before we even go into like an executive session, at least you know where they are in the process.
Would that be not more appropriate for the exec
You
session?
can, now you can defer it to the exec session. And you could tell Mark to
Go have
go
dinner,
have dinner
come back.
and come back.
Are you listening
Because
to us?
it doesn't have to be bifurcated. And I suspect, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was here last time, I suspect you'd rather do it all in the exec session than that.
I would prefer.
Does that work for you?
Does that work, Mark?
You're muted, Mark.
What's the, excuse me, the timing then that you want to go into executive session would be what time?
Well, it'd be at the end of the meeting. The
Yeah.
meeting isn't a particularly long one tonight. The
Could one
meeting
of us-
starts at 6.
Could one of us just text you?
Can Rick text you about
Sure.
7:30, kind of give you a
Yeah.
time zone?
You
I
bet.
have
Yeah.
We'll-
If
Well,
I
next
may, if I may, board members, police judge and your town attorney. I did have a conversation with Rick, late last week. And one of the things that we discussed is, the confidentiality that we provide to everybody that submits an application packet for the process.
Mhm.
And what we guarantee them is that there will be no information, their names, any of their professional affiliation will not be divulged until we get to a finalist stage. And then we notify them to make sure that they're still in the process and that they agree that we may then release names and pertinent information. So with that in mind, we're really in an exec session tonight, board members, I'm really not in a position to discuss any of the applicants. I will share with you the same thing that I've got in the memorandum that, I believe that you have, on your tabletop, which is that as of our last particular, perusal or review of the application packets, we have officially 3 that we've received to date. And we've got 2 individuals that have, pledged to us that they will submit their materials before the deadline of June 28th at 5 p.m. So that's some of the facts and information that I shared with Rick that I'm happy to share with you. And I guess I'm a little bit, wondering what exactly we would discuss in executive session that I could discuss in executive session with some degree of comfort, and confidentiality that I've just mentioned a few minutes ago. Maybe Jerry could enlighten me a little bit.
Well, you really confused me, Mark, because what I hear you sort of saying is, okay, this is a short version of what I tell you later.
No, but I.
Help me out.
It is, Jerry, it is. It's the Reader's Digest
So
version.
why, if there's a later opportunity, why are we doing it now?
Well, I just,
We need her back here at exec session.
We need you back, because there'll be questions to the board. That it'll be a back and forth dialogue that I think the board's gonna be more comfortable with. In executive session, if you were on earlier, you heard me telling I've come to the conclusion the scope of that session can be broad enough to have that kind of back and forth. I think they wanna have it with you in that setting.
More of the process, Mark. You can help us develop the process so that we're all on the same page. Without going into the personal information that you need to keep confidential.
I'm happy to do that. Is there any reason why that information can't be part of a public open process?
Right now, we're
Yes, I'm a
just
little
in work session. We're just in work session though. And we're not in regular meeting.
Yeah, and Mark's asking here, but you may not have been on the call when I was describing to the board the research I've done around the personnel exception. Was that true? Yes or not?
I was not part of that full no, I was
Okay.
not privy to that information. No.
And in your defense, I spent some time earlier articulating to the board that they were honestly concerned last time that they weren't able to have some of that dialogue in executive session. I did the research, Mark, determined that they could, told them that that's fine, we'll do that tonight. So you came in to this meeting without having heard me say that.
Right.
And proceeded to be confused, which I now understand. But hopefully you now understand that we'd like to hear the full deal from you, and we'd like to discuss it, have questions of you. We'd like to do that in executive session, which will be at the end of our meeting, which is not a really lengthy meeting, but we can text you. And do you have the link for the executive session, which is a different Zoom link than this one?
I will have to double check. Rick, do you know whether or not the clerk sent me a separate Zoom link for the exec session?
I do not know, but I can make sure you get that link.
Okay, will do. So with that information, I will go ahead and await a text message from Rick. And I'll be on the standby list, and then I'll also be on the lookout for that Zoom link for the exec session. And I'll see you then later this evening.
Thanks very much.
Okay,
Thanks,
You
Mark.
bet.
thanks, Mark.
You bet. Thank you. You bet.
Okay. So anything else that we want to bring up in work session?
That committee, how will that be formed and
Yeah, how do you want to form?
Well, let's go ahead.
composition and such?
Okay. I mean, we're gonna add it to the regular meeting.
Oh, we are, okay.
Yeah.
that part of it.
Yeah.
Can we work out some of the dialogue now, since we've got a couple of minutes, and so they can slam dunk it at 6 o'clock?
So I wasn't ever.
We're in a work
involved
session, you're
in
fine.
The,
Yeah, it's just a work session.
Oh, I thought you were done, I'm sorry.
no, we're not.
You're,
Well, we.
So it's okay. No, you can have a seat. You're welcome to, but we're gonna continue talking. So, I wasn't ever involved in actually being a part of that functioning. And John, were you? Okay,
We didn't,
so,
we didn't ever get together.
I think Mary Sims was the other one who was the staff member who,
I believe so,
but it has been years, so.
yeah. And is she planning to be here later? Okay, so we could just get input from her later. Ideas ahead of that.
Do we want to have a couple of board members?
You can
on
have
that?
two board of selectmen, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
That would be your number, yeah.
So that's fine.
Okay.
And then, yeah, and then we can get input from the staffs. Please.
Someone, well, the citizen need to be on the committee.
Yeah, it's great, yeah. Number of.
I think that would be good.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay,
Somebody would be on the total, then if you take two from selectmen, then how does the all process of that? How many more do you, who do you have? Who else do you have?
well, I guess that's the question. So, I mean, Mary Sims was on it. I don't think was the administrator on it?
On the committee,
Yeah,
I think so.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. Okay,
this was goes all the way back to Tom Hale.
correct,
Wow.
Yeah, they have
yeah.
gray hair, no hair.
That's how good it went, huh?
So,
It's not long,
so
it's been-
administrator, treasurer, not necessarily the
Staff.
treasurer, yeah, one of their staff person.
Yeah, one of those.
Two board members and
A member at large.
a member at large.
A community member.
Yeah.
Or five.
Five, gotcha.
Community, yeah, some, you know, the residents.
Okay, does that seem reasonable? I mean, okay,
That's a good working number.
it is, it is. Okay. All right, anything else?
Wow.
What about?
Okay.
What about what?
Take a 20-minute break.
Rich, what did you say? What about that?
The when, like,
Oh, when? I think you said the wind. I was like, ooh, like,
No, like-
okay, like,
when are they gonna meet?
when?
Well, can that be left to the committee to work that detail out? I mean, it's not something that
That's good.
we dictate as. I think.
First Monday of October.
Now it's gotta be soon.
All right, so anything else for work session?
21 minutes, we're always.
14 technically.
It's okay. No,
Yes, I did.
it's okay. It's okay to have a
14
break before
minutes.
the main event.
Yeah.
Okay, then we'll go ahead and end the work session. It is 5:46 PM. And we will start up our regular meeting at 6.
I'm gonna get dinner.
Charter is done.
Yeah.
Yep, they're voting on it now. Charter is done.
Did you even have to recall?
No, it was pretty tight.
I'm sad you did that.
Need perspective.
We can set there. Yeah.
We've done work to.
Started out for the regular meeting, so thank you very much.